John Bachman, this is now. Today is the second day of December 2020, and we now have less than 1 week from what is known as Safe Harbor Day. That's the deadline by which all state election disputes, including court challenges and recounts, must be resolved. So the clock is ticking. We'll talk more about President Trump's legal challenges ahead in a moment. But first, we begin with Attorney General William Barr and the Justice Department. And whose side is he on? There are conflicting reports today about what the DOJ is doing to investigate all of these claims of widespread election fraud we've heard about. Barr telling the AP that the Justice Department has not uncovered any evidence of voter fraud that would change the outcome of the presidential race at this point. But the AP story also dropped that the DOJ issued statements to clear up Barr's comments. According to CBS News, the department spokesperson says this: some media outlets have incorrectly reported that the DOJ has concluded its investigation of election fraud. That is not what the Associated Press is reporting, and it's not what Attorney General Barr stated. The department will continue to receive and vigorously pursue all specific, incredible allegations of fraud as expeditiously as possible. Barr also revealed during that AP interview that he had appointed U.S. Attorney John Durham as a special counsel to look into Crossfire Hurricane back in October. Now, the Justice Department is also investigating a possible bribery for pardon scheme connected to the White House. Newly unsealed court records show a judge reviewed a request in August from prosecutors to access documents that they believed showed proof of a secret lobbying scheme that included funneling money to the White House in exchange for a presidential pardon. President Trump has already pardoned or commuted several allies, including Michael Flynn and Roger Stone. And we are now hearing there is a list of other associates allegedly making their own appeals before Trump possibly leaves office, including 3 of his adult children, Donald Trump Jr., Eric Trump, and Ivanka Trump, as well as his son-in-law and senior White House advisor Jared Kushner. The president's attorney, former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani, is also reportedly looking into a preemptive pardon. This has been reported by several big media sources. Now, Giuliani, of course, is denying a New York Times report which said this. He claimed he talked about a pardon with President Trump as recently as last week. A separate Times opinion piece says President Trump should be criminally investigated and prosecuted after he leaves the White House. Well, Fox News' Sean Hannity also weighed in on the pardon issue this week during his interview with Sidney Powell.
And if that's what they want to do, if Biden ever became president, I'd tell Trump, pardon yourself and pardon your family. These people are based on a phony dossier.
Now, that's a big if, and that was obviously with Newt Gingrich and not with Sidney Powell, but the same evening as his interview with Sidney Powell. Now let's welcome in Matthew Whitaker. He's the former acting Attorney General. He's also the author of Above the Law, the inside story of how the Justice Department tried to subvert President Trump. He's also a Newsmax analyst. Matt, great to see you again. Thanks so much.
Hey, John, good to be with you.
All right, so let's start with Attorney General William Barr and the Justice Department. You know, we can't forget that he issued this memo back about 3 weeks ago, giving federal prosecutors the authority to investigate voter fraud. But he also warned that, quote, suspicious, speculative, or fanciful, far-fetched claims should not be a basis for initiating federal inquiries. So it sounds like that's where he is. He doesn't believe that everything we've heard so far is really enough to pursue a real investigation. How do you see it, Matt?
Yeah, John, I see it as the general is being very specific with his words, and what he said to the AP and what was cleared up by the spokesperson from the Department of Justice is that they have looked at credible allegations of fraud. They have not found yet any systemic fraud that would change the election in any of these states. But the investigation isn't over, and obviously we've all heard the allegations. We've all, in some of these states, seen what's alleged, whether it's non-residents voting in Nevada, whether it is ineligible voters voting in places like Michigan and Pennsylvania. And I know that the Department of Justice is going to look at every single credible allegation. And I don't think it has ended. What I would caution people is the Department of Justice doesn't do their investigations in public. They obviously, the FBI needs to enhance its credibility. I think through the Mueller investigation and what happened to President Trump in the administration for the last 4 years, I think there is some suspicion among a lot of Americans that the FBI hasn't, sort of played it straight. And I think this is an example where the American people are looking for credible allegations of fraud to be investigated and, quite frankly, people to be prosecuted if they violated the law.
You know, Matt, we mentioned at the onset of the program that we're less than a week away from that safe harbor day, which all these legal challenges are supposed to be resolved by then. You know what it's like to try and mount a case in that amount of time. Is the deck stacked against President Trump's attorneys?
I don't think it is, but again, I have not seen the evidence of what they've alleged, and I think a lot of Americans are taking a wait-and-see approach. Obviously, every day that goes by without sort of this evidence being presented to whether it's the legislatures in the states that are in controversy or judges in those states that could reverse potentially the election results in those states, I think is a lost day. And so time is of the essence, John. But at the same time, this process has to play out. What I fear is that we're going to, get to a point where it is not reversible, and then we actually hear the evidence or see where the election outcome could have been changed if people had followed up and with haste and, the necessary attention to these matters.
Yeah, that's kind of the worst case scenario, right? After the fact, after Joe Biden would be sworn in, we'd find out that there was enough evidence here to change the outcome of the election. That would be the worst case scenario. So what would happen then?
Well, that's a good question, and I'm not sure we've ever crossed that bridge. We saw where for 2+ years, Democrats tried to undo the 2016 election through, the Mueller investigation and other means to sort of suggest that somehow President Trump hadn't won fair and square. I mean, I think when the shoe's on the other foot, it's amazing to me that the mainstream media just, doesn't have any interest or inquiry into some of these legitimate allegations of voting irregularities. And, this isn't just about Trump, and it's not just about 2020. This is about the future of our republic. And if we don't fix some of these things, these close elections are always going to be disputed, and it undermines really the greatness of America. And so we got to fix these things as they come about. And, so it's just not about 2020.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens from now until next week and what happens with the Electoral College. I also wanted to ask you about this, bribery for pardon scheme being reported by a lot of folks. Again, a lot of this stuff is based on unnamed sources. Sounds pretty fanciful to me. Have you heard anything about this? Mayor Giuliani is denying it very strongly.
Yeah, so I read very carefully both the stories that were written and as well as the judge's opinion out of the D.C. District Court. And, it looks to me like there was an allegation that was investigated. There were, lawyers and lobbyists that were involved. And it's just hard, obviously no one knows who it is or who it affects, but there were search warrants that had been executed. Lawyers' emails and documents had been seized. And the question was whether they could review those and whether the attorney-client privilege had been waived. And so, I mean, this is a hyper-technical issue that's in the weeds, and I'm not sure ultimately at the end of the day that this is going to amount to much, but obviously the media loves the wild speculation where they can accuse the White House and President Trump and his associates of malfeasance. We've seen this play so many times, John, that I am very skeptical until actually the rubber meets the road.
Well, what piqued our interest about this story, we flashed up the documents. That's public information now. But when you know how the FBI broke the law to pursue other investigations of Trump allies, you wonder, were these search warrants obtained on the up and up? And so that's why I think it warrants closer attention. But Matt, we'll continue to keep an eye on it. We'll check back in with you. We appreciate your time. It's always great to see you.
Always enjoy joining you, John. Thank you.
You just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news channel, now in more than 70 million homes. You can get Newsmax TV on your cable system or check your cable guide. And if your system doesn't carry Newsmax, call them, tell them you want Newsmax TV, because we're real news for real people.